Hey guys, welcome back to another YouTube video where again I'm talking about books. Today we're gonna go into a little more in-depth of In the Mouth of the Wolf. This book was previously in a video I've done talking about just my top 5 favorite books so far, but I think this book deserves a video all on its own, because it's just so good, but also really questions a lot. So let's get into it. First off, In the Mouth of the Wolf is a non-fiction true story. It follows a journalist named Regina Martinez. Regina Martinez was a journalist in Veracruz, Mexico, and Regina was a badass. She covered a lot of corruption and politics and crime within Mexico, and wasn't afraid to speak her mind and confront a lot of corruption in the country. Well, one day, she wrote for this one magazine called Prosecco. I'm pretty sure I'm pronouncing that wrong, so my apologies. And oftentimes her news stories would just disappear from newsstands. Editions of this magazine would randomly disappear from newsstands. But that never stopped her. There were all of these different warning signs, or not necessarily warning signs, but it was very clear that certain people within the Mexican government did not like and was not a fan of her articles, basically outing them for corruption. Well, one day, Regina, coming home from work, was found beaten to death in her bathroom. She was bludgeoned in her bathroom and was murdered. And this rocked, obviously, her friends, her family, and brought up a lot of questions about what happened. Because she was murdered during a time where a lot of journalists were just randomly disappearing or murdered in Mexico. So the author of this book, Katherine Corcoran, who was one of the leading journalists for the Associated Press down in Mexico, had a lot of, she was very sad about Regina's death, but she also had a lot of questions about what happened. And so she traveled to Veracruz and, along with some of Regina's friends, figured out what happened, who killed Regina, why was she killed. She was working on this really big article as well, but it never got published because she was murdered before it was. But then also figuring out, what did she find out? It was going to be based on these two politicians in Mexico. So it was really like, what happened? Who killed her? And what did she find out? This book is written so beautifully because it, as a journalist myself, it just kind of proves that even journalists can write good non-fiction books that read like fiction. The entire time, if I didn't know beforehand that this book was non-fiction and based on real events and real people, I would have thought it was just something that someone came up with. And it is just a good example of good feature writing. I was able to actually meet Katherine Corcoran a few years ago when this book came out. This book came out right, I want to say around October, November of 2022. And I was able to meet her, and she talked about the process of writing this book. And she really pulls in on good storytelling elements when it comes to feature writing, because it mixes the facts with fiction writing techniques, if that makes sense. So Katherine, she told me she had 2 journals that she kept. One journal was based on all the facts, and the other one was based on little details and storytelling techniques to make this a really compelling story. Obviously, I'm not going to spoil the ending for you, but I was on the edge of my seat the whole time, because not only does this tell the story of Regina, but it also outlines the whole process that Katherine went to uncover what happened. This is true, like, investigative reporting, and the dangers that Katherine went through just to figure out the truth. And it brings up this really important question about freedom of press and freedom of speech in a country that is supposedly a democracy, and how kind of scary it can be to be silenced in a country where you're supposed to have that freedom of speech. Obviously, this was in Mexico, and Mexico's a little bit different than the United States, but, you know, there's always a lot of what ifs. I won't go into a lot more. I could talk someone's ear off about this book for hours, but I'm not going to. I'll keep it short and sweet, but it's a really tragic story, but it's also really inspiring for people who maybe want to be journalists when they grow up, and just showcases how government can sometimes be corrupt and we don't know it, and how important it is to sort of have like a fourth sort of check and balance, as so to speak, journalists, just making sure everyone stays in line, essentially. Because at the end of the day, journalists are meant to be sort of that fourth check and balance within the government. So corruption, if there is corruption, people get called on it and people are held accountable. Yeah, I guess those are my thoughts on In the Mouth of the Wolf. It truly is such a great piece of literature. I recommend it to everyone who is looking for something good to read. You know, there are some gruesome parts in the book, obviously, so trigger warning for that if you don't like blood and gore, but overall it's just an incredible book. So thank you so much for watching yet again another video from me, the wannabe YouTuber, and I'll see you around.